Continuing on in our Look Fantasy Football 2013, we're up to the New Orleans Saints. Saints may be the best fantasy football team that is out there. They've got lots of options for offense. Running backs, wide receiver, quarterback, tight end, it's all good for the New Orleans Saints. They're led by Drew Brees. Brees, the last 2 years, has thrown for over 5,000 yards. He's thrown over 40 touchdowns. He's thrown for fewer than 20 interceptions each year. This is a guy, along with Aaron Rodgers, are the only two quarterbacks you should really consider in the first 4 rounds of the draft. Know that you're going to end up, if you do that, with a pretty poor running attack, but they're just worthy of that type of consideration. They have so much more fantasy value than some of the other quarterbacks that kind of get lumped in together in that good, even very good range. So obviously draftable, but just not quite that same caliber as Rodgers or Brees. And again, Brees, certainly a top 4 draft pick at the quarterback spot. Running back, it's a 3-headed monster. Mark Ingram, Pierre Thomas, and Darren Sproles. Ingram might get a little more love this year because he's got some value on the goal line. He had 5 touchdowns last year, might end up with 6 or 7 this year, and is a decent running back 4. Pierre Thomas probably would be toward the very, very end of even draftable running backs. And then Darren Sproles is a great running back 3. He doesn't carry the ball a lot, but he does catch a lot of passes. He caught 75 passes last year. He caught 7 touchdowns. They like getting him out in space near the goal line, have him make one guy miss and get into the end zone. The guy has a lot of fantasy value as a running back 3, and he has a tendency to go in that same type of category around round 3 or 4. Seems to be when Darren Sproles usually is pulled out of the draft. At wide receiver, they've got Marcus Colston, and they have Lance Moore. Both of them are terrific. They're great downfield threats. They catch a lot of passes. They'll get a lot of yards. They'll score a lot of touchdowns. Both of them fall in that 5 to 8 range as far as rounds for a wide receiver to go as a solid wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. I mean, they're not in the Calvin Johnson category, but they're not that far behind. Again, they are solid wide receiver 1s in that Steve Smith type of category. I just talked about the Panthers recently. Tight end is Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham is by far the #1 tight end with Rob Gronkowski being hurt. Graham is head and shoulders and body and legs ahead of everyone else. People are considering him in the first round of the draft. I would never take a tight end that early, but if you're going to do it, Graham's the only one you would consider doing it for. He doesn't last past the first couple of picks in the second round. He just is so much better than anyone else in a position that doesn't have very many people even worthy of really drafting, that it gives him more fantasy value than any tight end should. But again, if you're going to get a tight end and you want to take a real risk, Jimmy Graham is a great pickup. Just know, again, you're going to have a terrible running game, and that might doom your chances of winning your league. But again, if you're going to do any tight end, he's the man. Defensively and special teams-wise, the Saints are terrible, so there's no real reason to consider their defense. And no matter how good their special teams might be, you simply can't like their defense enough to worry about it unless you thought they were going to return 10 or 12 punts and kicks for touchdowns on the year. So just don't worry about the Saints defensively. And their kicker, Garrett Hartley, is very good. He kicks indoors. He should be solid. He's going to be solid again. And look for him to be draftable higher than others simply because the Saints will score so many points, but you do have to be a little bit leery there because you want a guy who kicks a lot of field goals, not a lot of extra points. But because the Saints will score so many points, he's a solid pick for you to look at in the draft. So again, Brees, the only quarterback along with Aaron Rodgers that you should consider in the first 4 rounds of the draft. Sproles will be taken in round 3 or 4 as a running back 3. Ingram maybe a guy you take in round 9 or 10. At wide receiver, Moore and Marcus Colston are very good and solid picks in that 7, 8, 9 category. Jimmy Graham is the only tight end that is going to go in the first round. He will not go past the second, and even then it's probably the first 2 or 3 picks in the second. Defense don't worry about, and the kicker, go ahead and take him because the Saints are going to score a lot of points.